Welcome. It's so lovely to see all of you here. We have just started to have a series of lectures, performances, anything people want to share, because we think it's really great for people to have a chance to connect with other human beings after that long COVID drought. And so our main goal today is that you have a good time. Now, the other part of this series is that whoever does the presenting gets to choose where the free will offering goes. So this time, Dawn has chosen the Auburn Interfaith Food Pantry. I can't remember which ones are banks or pantries or
located on Auburn
Is this one a
Ravine.
closet? Okay, yeah. I can't remember what structure. But in any case, yes. Oh, there's still, oh, that's excellent. And you know, we do have more chairs, too. Yeah. Yeah, we do. We do have chairs in the cupboards, yes. Okay. Okay, so last time, so I'm going to just put a little challenge to you all. Last time, our last concert, which was our first concert, we raised $912 for the Loomis Food Pantry. So do you think you can beat that? Yeah, it's a great way to give to your community and help people in need. So please give freely, knowing that it's going to help some agencies that have had a huge increase. I saw some statistics about how many more people are asking for help than they were just a few years ago. And it was a staggering percentage. It was like 1,800%. It was like a huge percentage. And I just was stunned. So anything you give will go and be used carefully and wisely and compassionately. All right. So I had the great pleasure of having this man standing next to me be part of the congregation here. And then I started hearing his story. And I think today he's going to let you in on some secrets that he would not divulge until today. I know. What's he going to come up with? But you're going to love this. And I love that the tallest bridge in California is right here. How cool is that? So I don't want to... Let's see if we can get everyone in here. I don't want to let anyone miss out on a single word, just in case he starts out with one of those secrets.
Uh-oh.
You know, like, yeah.
Like flipping coins from the top of the piers or something?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, what? Okay. So in any case, enjoy.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
No, he's got me on. First of all, name is Donald Anderson. I grew up in a little town called Kingsburg below Fresno in a little farming community. And I graduated from Fresno State as an agricultural engineer. And that's always fun. I was classified as a civil with the Bureau of Reclamation, but I used to rub it in a little bit with the civils now and then. I don't claim to be an engineer. I'm an engineering manager. I went to work for the Bureau of Reclamation in Sacramento. 1958, was working in the office, and after 3 years, I said, let me out. I went to Redding and worked on Spring Creek Power Plant, part of the Trinity River Project, and then worked on transmission lines between Cottonwood and Tracy, and probably climbed at least half those towers. And then someone decided I need to go to Washington, D.C. for 6 months for a so-called management training program, but a better nickname would be a lesson in practical politics. Because I got into enough of that later on. And I came here to Auburn in 1967 as the budget and programs engineer, in charge of the finance. 19 months of that, and I said, let me out again. So the first thing was doing the Overlook Pacific Avenue. I did the headquarters building down there where PCWA is now, and then the road, Indian Hill, and then my boss one day said, you are going out on the bridge. Oh, okay. Well, it was just on the piers, And I'm going to get rid of some of this stuff now that you've seen my working uniform. If I can get out of it. Well, we'll do it that way. But they were having some problem with the inspector in charge of the piers, and my boss sent me out to give him a hand. It was pretty obvious what was going on. So we finished up the piers, and then he called us in and said, "You're going out on the steel." I said, "What?" The biggest bridge I'd ever built was Pacific Avenue Bridge. And the inspection force were 4 graduate engineers, which is very, very unusual to have graduate engineers on inspection. But we were the youngest people on the project. And probably the engineering company regretted he had engineers on. But with that, let's turn the lights off, and we'll turn the projector on. And this is about like I am. It's got a few years on it. I think I've got him beat at 90, but we'll see what we can find out here. This was an artist's conception that was done some time ago. And this is the canyon before we got there. And you can see these houses are still up. Clementine is up here. And this was the start of the excavation. This was for one of the piers. And all the roads and everything we had to get access to the piers. This was the Foresthill side. You can see this is the beginning of the abutment right here. This area right down here is an independent structure. That was Pier 1 for the bridge itself. And this is some of the concrete work going on, getting the abutments in. We had a batch plant on site that did all the concrete, and all the aggregate came from Joe Cheverot's Bear River. This is the completed abutment. And this structure right here is an independent pier, and the bridge will sit right on that. So it's a completely independent structure. Here we are looking again. We kind of adjusted the landscape a wee bit. And this was the excavation for the big tall piers. They're 430 feet high, 403 feet high. And this was the foundation for that big pier. And this is the tower crane embedded in that first section. This is an 85-foot square section, 20 feet deep, and we add cooling water to cool that concrete. You get the heat of hydration. If you don't cool it, you're going to have cracks. Same thing with your major dams. Here we're putting up the tower crane for the first time for 100 feet. And they're using a truck crane. We embedded that section. And right here, you'll see a structure. And that's where they jack the crane up. They move it up. We moved it up in 4 different lifts, tied off to the pier. We got 430 feet under the hook. Again, this is the hoisting mechanism going up. Here we are at 100 feet. And the way you get up there is a ladder. And this is that big base slab you see. The piers are hollow to where you see where they curve on top. And this is 2 layers of about 1 3/4 inch steel. And the walls in this are probably about 10 feet thick. This is the big slab there, and we're starting up with the steel doing the piers. And I know all of you have probably done your sidewalks and your foundations for your homes, probably using 3/4 inch maximum rock. And when you dump the concrete, it'll probably flow 4 feet. This miserable stuff was 3-inch rock from Joe Cheverot's pit. Quite often, we had to vibrate it out of the bucket. And you can see laborers there with the big air vibrators consolidating, extremely high strength. There's a report over there of the strengths and everything of the concrete. Miserable stuff to work with. Here again, you can see it, and the laborers there consolidating this. But the strengths were fantastic. Here we're looking over, this would be the Foresthill side, I believe. You can see the crane sitting there. And again, the landscape got adjusted a wee bit. Here we are. Now you can see the crane is tied off right there to the pier. And what these forms were, we went up at 10 feet at a time. And we would place on one side, raise the pier on the other, alternate back and forth.
And that's hollow?
What? Yes. It's hollow for about 250 feet. If you look at where it makes, you look at the piers where it makes the curve, and that's where they're solid from there on up. Here again, just a couple more of the spectacular shots. Here again, getting up, and you can see we're getting pretty close right there to where it becomes solid. Here we're complete. There's 450 feet under the hook right there, and it's tied off onto the pier at 3 locations. And they take it down the same way they put it up. The jacking frame lifts it up. They take that section out, lower it, and just grind down. The steel was all fabricated in Japan. And per the Buy America Act, there was 15% applied to their bid, Willamette Western, because it was foreign steel. But the steel was absolutely excellent. Fabrication was almost perfect. We probably had 2 or 3 miss holes in all the holes in that bridge. And it was fabricated in 3 plants in Japan, Mitsubishi, IHI, and Kawasaki Industries. And the Bureau of Reclamation had inspectors there all during the fabrication of the steel. And actually, each side was laid down. It was actually erected, laying down, everything match marked and everything. And this is when we first started bringing the iron in for the Auburn side. They brought the shipload, came in, Port of Sacramento, and Biggie Transport hauled it up, and it was unloaded with this crane. We had steel stacked all the way up to the freeway. And then to get the steel out to the crane, they had this little railroad car winch it out. That member is 4x4 by about 105 feet long. Would someone bring me a glass of water, my dear? My wife, I think. Yes. Oh, thank you. But this is the first piece going out. And it was supported by 4 of these bent structures. This is all bridge steel, and that's the first member that went out. And you can see there they're starting to erect. That bridge steel is right there, and this is actually bridge. There you can see first going out. That was the first bent that was done. There were 3 of them, and that's the first steel that went out. Here we're out, and we've got 2 bents now. Let me see if I can focus that a little tiny bit. Nah, it's okay, I guess. But you can see that crane, that's 200,000 pounds of crane sitting there. And when we got out to the last bent, this was all specially fabricated. There was a few pieces of bridge steel, but this was mainly junk when they were done. And here you can see we've taken the 2 out there, and we're sitting on that big, large bent coming out to the pier. Now there's the first members going down on the pier, getting ready to land there.
What's the size of the top at that point?
It'll fit a Greyhound bus up there. It's, I think, 20 by 60 feet. But you can see we're getting ready to land there on the pier. And you can see the safety nets. Right there, if you fell, you'd have about 130 feet before you hit the net. Back here, you'd have 50. And I would say if you went down on that, you might survive if you land on your back, but if you land on your stomach, it just folds you up. We had no one in the nets. Again, showing going out. This is on the Foresthill side, I believe. Here we're more sitting out there with that 200,000 pounds of crane sitting up there. This was just another one. This is Warm Springs Bridge. We took us over Willamette West. I had to throw it in to show the difference. And here again, the bent's still there. And we're 100 feet deep there and 50 feet back there. Now here's the top. And can you read that right there? What's it say? There's only 3 ways that could happen. If you were a mountain climber and used pinions to crawl up the concrete, the other would be if you parachute, and the other one would be by helicopter. And we heard it was a PG&E helicopter landed, and they put their trademark up there. But this is the big plate that goes down. That's 12 by 12 by 6 inches deep. That was part of the base slab for the big. And you know, bridges do move back and forth. And these are what they call the rocker arms. The bridge part will sit on there, and as the temperature changes, those will rock back and forth. And the bridge is designed to take a maximum of 26 inches of movement. And it's probably doing close to that now that it's a 4-lane road. Here, this is the heaviest member, 67,000 pounds. And believe you me, that bridge danced all over when that guy started picking that piece up. Here, just the iron workers getting ready. You can see the nets around, and then this great big monster going down on those rockers. Here's how they did the bolting. They were on 4 by 8 double, I think they're about 2 inches of plywood. There's their bolts, and these were the iron workers. And if there was a bolt, we had to be there also. There's a torque wrench there. That's not the one we used. We used torque wrenches with a 5-to-1 multiplier. So you pulled 100 pounds, you got 500 foot-pounds out. And this again, just landing her on that pier. More close up, but you can see these plates and the tremendous number of bolts. There they're down on it. We've landed on pier 1, pier 2. And there was, you can see this thing right here. It's a ladder you can crawl up and down, but a little farther on, you'll see how we did it a lot of the times. Now here we're starting to cantilever out. We'll go out 400 and some feet unsupported. And that crane really danced around. You could feel the movement. The sun would move you upstream and downstream. But when that crane picks them up, that bridge danced. The highest stresses this bridge will take is during the erection process. Here we're out, fully cantilevered out. Going to start on the other side. Here again, the bolting crews. These 2 fellas here are the connectors. One of them was an Indian from New York, and they're the ones that, if you look over right there, you'll see the drift pins they use to drive holes to align the bolts, and then they start bolting them up. I mentioned our way of getting up. This was John Wilkie, who was one of my engineers. We would just walk right up that diagonal. It was a lot easier than going up that miserable ladder. And if it was an H section, we'd slide down. And this is what the poor guy in there is holding those bolts where you got that miserable impact wrench banging away. Then we always had old Charlie Weaver, our business agent, making sure everything was done right. But I'll go into the bolting process. When the specifications went out, it said you will use calibrated air impact wrenches. They don't stay in calibration long enough. They're a miserable mess. So the contractor came in and said, will you approve the railroad turn of the nut method, where you bring the bolt up to snug and then you do a certain rotation? I said, okay. Well, then the four of us young engineers went out and we decided to do a little bolt testing. And we had a machine called a Skidmore. We had calibrated torque wrenches, and we had micrometers. So we would bring the bolts up in this machine about 100 foot-pounds at a time, and we knew when that bolt started taking load. And each time we went up, we put a micrometer on that bolt so we knew how much it was stretching. So we went up at 1,150 foot-pounds, the bolt failed. So we'd established a low end of 750 foot-pounds and the upper end of 1,100 foot-pounds. They did the same thing under lab conditions in Denver and came up with the same thing. Well, this was something completely new because we took a little different approach. Young engineers not knowing any better. Here's some of the spots we had to go to. But there's a shot here of John Wilkie. Yeah, this was the four of us, myself, Ron Clifton, Craig Dwyer, and John Wilkie. And those three worked for me when I was heading up Central Arizona Project. This is just a shot of John up there monkeying around. But when we went on a joint, we would start checking, and if they were loose, they'd have to be tightened. And the problem you had to go over with that big a connection, you had to go over the bolt several times. So we'd go over it, and if they were loose, too many loose, we'd reject it. Then, if we found over tight, we rejected those bolts. First time it had ever been done because of young, dumb engineers with their strength of materials. And that did not set real too good with the contractor. They had to replace a lot of bolts, but we had the backup. We had the backup from the lab. The top end was 1,100 foot-pounds, and if you go over, you throw the bolt away. And so we carried a little notebook in our pockets, and we had printed, and we checked every one. And then in the evening, we would come in and put all our values in a book. And we had about 6 books full. And the project manager came in to me one day and said, Don, you're going to have the biggest claim on the book, on the bolts, as you can imagine. Burke, I said, here's the books. We had 0 claim. But it was the first time that approach had ever been taken. And if we rejected the bolts, we painted them. So we knew exactly where they were. This is Gil. He's a Cajun. He threatened to throw me off the bridge several times. But had a lot of respect for him. He was excellent to work with. And Gil and I got along real good for the most part. Here we're coming out from the Foresthill side. Auburn, whoops. Yeah, let's get back here. Auburn side complete. We're coming out with another crane on the Foresthill side. And we're getting close. I think this is about June 11th or something like that of 1972. And
how did you transport to the lower level down at the confluence?
no, all that steel came in on the roads. Saw that picture with that big yellow thing hauling iron? They unloaded it.
Down and up again?
No, it came in, yeah, on the Foresthill side, yes, it had to come in the old road. There was no other way to get there. Big E Transport from Sacramento did all the transporting. Now we're getting close. And then we're getting closer. Some of these may be out of order a little bit. I gave them to the archives. I said, do not get them out of order. And I still have a few out. And this was the group down below watching.
That's the public viewing platform.
Yep, down there at the confluence. So here we go. That requires an 18-inch pin, 4 feet long. And so we're merrily on our way. This was the day before. The temperature was pretty good. And then we got to the day of closing. And the man upstairs decided he didn't want it warm, so he dropped the temperature into the 40s. And the Bureau of Reclamation had jacks, and they had 8 jacks to jack this thing. Contractor decided he could do it with 4. Well, he jacked and he jacked and he jacked, and that's where he was sitting. So what we finally had to do, we waited until the afternoon. The sun did its job. The bridge came in where it was supposed to, and they drove the pin. And the way they do that pin, get back here a little bit, that's an 18-inch pin, 4 feet long, and it had a bolt through it, and that's a hydraulic ram to pull it through. Well, our connector friends decided that wasn't fast enough. This is the Mohawk, and so that's about 500 pounds. They use it as a battering ram to drive that pin home. You can see them there, kind of nonchalant, laying there, 750 feet above the river. And then, typical thing when an iron worker closes a structure, there's 2 things happen. They have an American flag and they have a green tree. This was the closing ceremony when we closed it up. And this guy was not one of my favorites. He was Ellis Armstrong. He had worked for the Bureau. Then he came back, and he didn't think he was treated right. So he came back as commissioner and was going to punish us. He changed our name to the Service, Water and Power Service. And I was at Willows later on, and we had the Bureau of Reclamation sign. And they kept bugging me, why don't you change? Oh, we will, we will. Reagan came in, we kept the same name. This is Bill Gianelli. He was with head of Department of Water and Power for the state, Reagan's. And when Reagan went to Washington, Bill went as the head of Corps of Engineers. Excellent guy to work with, not that so-so. And then we got to use a few politicians. There's Bernice Pate. Many of you probably heard her. She was a councilwoman, had excellent Indian lures in the museum. Bill Chappie. I think it's Bill. Let me double check. Gene Chappie. He was the assemblyman at the time. He replaced Biz Johnson. And there was a bunch of other dignitaries there. And then we go out, and they have to go out on the bridge. So these forms went between these beams on the concrete. So this was Bill Pafford, the regional director, Bernice Pate, Armstrong, good old Charlie Weaver, Bill Cassidy, Ray Rowland, the construction engineer, and Ed Horton, who was my redeeming soul. And I don't think any of those people are still around anymore. But Ed Horton really did me good. He said, Don, I want you to go to Willows as field engineer, and I turned him down, and I'll tell you the story about that later. But here we're getting ready to put the concrete in. And this bridge, in order to load it correctly, you didn't just go continuously across. You did 25 feet here, 25 feet there, and all irregular. And at the time, the state of California was putting in the I-5 bridge out by the airport over the road. And the construction engineer for the state, Jake, came up. He looked and said, Don, you're going to have the worst imaginable riding because you're doing it this way. Well, when we were all done, we took the same instrument that Caltrans uses. Everything was in spec and no grinding. And if you went over the old I-5 bridge, you had to hold on. It tended to buck you off. So Jake never said any more. This concrete here was 1.5 inches, easy to work. And again, you can see this piece had been put in. This was the new one. And we had an experience. We ran out of aggregate one day, so we had a load of concrete in the pump. And in order to kill it, they threw a pound of sugar in it. It will kill concrete. Well, the next morning, they thought they got everything out. The next morning, we came in the slab, we found concrete that hadn't set. So we had to take it out and do it over again, but it was just a minor amount of sugar really did us in on that one. And this was the expansion joint. You'll see that in the middle of the bridge. That will take up to 26 inches. It looks like a cattle guard. Each one of these are attached to a slider. It was a German design, excellent. And here they're putting all the steel in. And here again, this was the painting. That was a nice thing to ride. John Wilkie was doing the paint inspection. And you can see the rail. That was 4-foot rail, and this was the barrier. This is when it was still 2-lane. And there she's complete, except we're still red. And at this time, red lead was still usable and hadn't been prohibited. So the corrosion protection was red lead, and it lasted a long time. And you can see they're beginning to do some painting. And then came the day, Labor Day 1973, when we dedicated the bridge. And if you, Tina the elephant and the donkey, I think the Wells Fargo stage went across first, Roper went across, and that was the big day. And you can see it was open at the time. And the reason for that, the Bureau replaced the road in kind, and it was a 2-lane road, and that's all we could afford to do. But Biz Johnson, when he got the project authorized back in 1965, had the piers and the structure built to handle 4 lanes. And here about 10 years ago, the county went in and put the extra 2 lanes in. And they also, there was some seismic retrofit work that had to be done because the seismicity requirements had changed from the 60s to the 90s. So that contract, and they had to blast off all of the red lead, and in fact, that contract was about $60 million, and the total cost of the bridge was about $15 million. And there you can see her, she's in her glory. The new bridge, the old bridge, the 49 bridge, and there's the mountain quarries. You'll hear me refer to them their real names, the Auburn Foresthill Bridge and the mountain quarry, not no hands, or the Foresthill Bridge. I know why it's the Foresthill Bridge. They had a celebration by the Foresthill Chamber of Commerce and a sign went up Foresthill. So it's still the Auburn Foresthill Bridge to me. And there we did have snow. Do you remember that? Yeah. When the guy went off with the Corvette? And so that kind of completes it. And my last job, like I say, I was the construction engineer for the largest project the Bureau of Reclamation has taken on, the Central Arizona project. I was lucky to be selected as a construction engineer, and it was bringing water from the Colorado River to Phoenix and Tucson, a lot in between. And when I went down, they said, you had 2 things to do. You're going to get this thing on schedule, and you're going to get a project management system. We brought a project management system, and we brought it in 6 months ahead of schedule. My management style is by wandering around and delegation. And when we were trying to figure out how to get that thing back on schedule, some of my fellows put together and water in the ditch. They met every week, anything, and we brought her in by that contract. And those guys, we brought it in 6 months ahead of schedule.
How long did it take in total?
What's that?
How long did it take in total? You told the time, you said you brought it in 6 months.
They had started, when I got there, the Central Arizona project had gotten to the Salt River. And we built all the rest, and we built all the 3 pumping plants in between. And it was kind of interesting. The pumping plant, these were 3,000 cubic feet per second pumping plants. And the one closest to Phoenix happened to be the farthest along. And it also had a real good well of about 2,000 gallons a minute. So what we did, we dropped the gates on each side, we filled the canal up, we tested a unit. At the other 2 plants, Baus and Harquahela, we didn't have that good a well. But we were able to test the oil systems. And so Havasu, with 3,000 CFS, pumping 824 feet, 500 CF pumps and 60,000 horse motors, and they started online, 13.5 kilovolts. We dimmed the lights in Havasu City and all the ATMs went off, so we had to revise a little bit. So the minute we started pumping at Havasu, it was bang, 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 bang. So we brought water into Phoenix on May 5th of 1985.
When did you start?
I came there, I don't know when the project started, I don't have that, but I came in October of 83. And we built the last half and all of the pumping plants, and we had other projects. On the Salt River project, we rehabbed 2 of the dams that the Salt River, and actually on Roosevelt Dam that was built in 1910, we actually raised it 100 feet. And then we put in a big reservoir. Waddell, there was an irrigation district that had a reservoir of 160,000 CFS. We raised it to 900,000, and it was filled by the pump generating plant. Pump water in the winter when there was water and power, and then reverse flow when we're going out. So it actually peaked out in March, and that's the peak of the recreation season there. And it was also in the event of a failure between that reservoir and Colorado River, we had enough water for 2 years.
Any deaths?
What's that?
Any deaths from?
We had 0 lost time injuries on that bridge steel. 0. We had one fella cut his hand up on the road where we were repairing one, but as far as the steel, actually erection, we had 0 lost time injuries. It's a record that's hard to break. Yes?
Okay, Don, how many gold nuggets did you pick up down there when you were digging them footings?
Not anything there. The interesting thing,
That's what they all say.
we were in solid rock. We weren't in the canyon.
Did
And
you get the bedrock when you?
Yeah, we were in bedrock. You saw that one picture.
Yeah.
That was all in bedrock. I didn't work on I left in 1973, became a construction engineer at Pyramid Lake, Nevada, putting in a dam. Then I went to Willows as project construction engineer, but I never worked at all down in the canyon. That work was all done after I left. Yes?
The cantilever is still the tallest in the world, yet there are other bridges taller. Is the cantilever too complicated, too expensive?
There's all kinds of them. I mean, you see, I wouldn't be able to answer the question very honestly. It is the highest bridge in California. It is the same bridge as the first bridge on Shasta on I-5. It's the deck truss, and it also has a railroad below it. But there's all kinds. I wouldn't be able to really answer that, I'm not that familiar with the rest of them. But this one actually launched my career. When I retired, I was a senior construction engineer in the Bureau of Reclamation. Anything else back there?
So the idea was that the dam would then fill up to where? What was
38 feet in the top. The question always comes up, why did we have to build the Foresthill Bridge first? When they went in to do the excavation on the canyon and put in the coffer dam was designed for a 20-year flood. And if it exceeded that, it went out like it did. It was designed to do just exactly what it did. But at that point, the old road, 49, was flooded. You had no access. And there was no way to get to Forest Hill. Placerville people could come in the other way, and you always hear, when's our bridge coming? And the original plan was to have the bridge over the top of the dam. And they've had some bad experiences. Hoover was one. And so what they did, we were going to have a downstream crossing for the Highway 49 bridge.
You know, those pillars that are there today that you talked about, are they still hollow?
Yeah.
There's nothing in them.
No, 250 feet, they're hollow till you get up to where it flares out. There was no need for structurally to have solid. And you'd have to cool it too, because of the heat of hydration. Yes?
I heard that since the concrete pillars were designed to be underwater, that the fact that they are not currently underwater, there was some degradation, or is ongoing degradation.
Have you ever looked at the piers on the bridges on Shasta Lake when the lake is down? It's designed for either wet or dry. It's designed that way. Yes?
Don, what is the wind implications, whether wind limits that are on the bridge before they worry about too much wind, or?
No. The highest stress that that bridge takes is when it's during erection. And no, there was no wind worry. The bridge would move up and down, upstream and downstream with temperature. And if the hippies were walking up, we all of a sudden had a problem with the iron workers running over the other side. Because you know what was happening upstream. I'm in a church, so I have to be good. I've cleaned up my language quite a bit. Anything else?
Yeah. Don, you said that they went up, the pillars go up 400 and
3 feet high,
how far did they go down?
20 feet into the rock.
That's what you
And
said.
there was a 85 by 85 by 20 foot 6 slab they sat on. You saw that picture of the
Yeah.
base of the tower crane. It was embedded. And that was cool because of the mass concrete. Like a dam, you have to cool the concrete to prevent cracking.
Another question.
Yeah.
When you walk up there on the Forest Hill side, kind of between the post pillar on the Forest Hill side and the road, there's another big block of concrete sitting there. I just assumed that was for some sort of construction code or something. But it just sits there.
Where at?
Well, sure, there's a road that you can take from the confluence.
Yep.
Pretty steep.
The old Forest Hill Road.
No, not, this is an old.
Oh, going up,
You know where the vision, where you showed the
okay,
vision?
probably going up to Clementine.
No, it's, you know where you showed the vision
Yeah.
center, where you picture all the people? There's a road that goes up there, cuts back, and it takes you up to the Forest Hill side. And when you get behind that post, pillar, whatever it is on the Forest Hill side, and you're up maybe halfway, there's a flat area, and on that flat area is a big hunk of concrete, that's 20 by 20, and it's sitting at about that high.
No idea.
And it has some bolts sticking.
It wasn't anything, oh, it could have been the foundation for that big bent. Because they had to put a concrete slab there to hold that big bent for the last tall one. That one was 286 feet high.
Okay.
That's probably what it was. We did put in some circular columns on the Auburn side for monitoring, survey monitoring for any movement.
John,
Yes?
I would urge anybody who hasn't been across it on foot to go. It's really fun.
Well, prior to putting the 2 new lanes in, if you were walking across that and the logging trucks went, that baby would shake, rattle, and roll.
Now, my grandson was there was a truck went by, I don't remember it being a logging truck, and he was really kind of worried that it wouldn't stand up.
Well, it was kind of devious what we did, several things, but there's a catwalk that you can walk all the way out. And when we would get to the end, we'd have ropes across. Well, we'd get people wandering around, and we had about a 4-foot piece of pipe. We'd get them out there, and we'd hit that. You want to see people about croak. And the other fun thing we had was we had signs down at the confluence, no fishing, nothing. They'd last about a day. So the fishermen and the hippies would come wandering up. We'd scream at them, if you drop this pin from 730 feet, you're going to have a world of hurt. And we could not. So, okay, friend, we're going to fix this. We had nice, white, beautiful sandblast sand. So we got our spot in the middle, and we'd see them wandering up. We'd yell, and they'd wave. We'd wait about 100 feet, and we'd drop one of those bags. It took 8 seconds when it hit the water, a wave about 100 feet, and a cannon shot. You want to see people run. That was one of our more devious things. I know you all knew Bill Cassidy and Claiborne and Joe Carroll. Well, that was the Trika that visited every week, but they would always hit the foothill first. So they would be a little shaky, and we'd done it for them one time, and they came out, and the boss was there, Ray Rowland. He was pretty straightforward. And we had to do it for those guys. And I thought, that's the end of dawn. Ray thought it was great. Yes?
You may have said this, but when the two cantilevered sections finally met in the middle to put the pin in, without jacking and before it was jacked in the place, about how far off were they?
We were off about 4 inches. What it was the Bureau had a design for a jack in each section of the core. There was going to be 8 jacks. The contractor's consultant said we can do it with 4. Well, maybe that would have worked in June 11th within 100 degrees, but it didn't. And that's not the only place we had a little problem with consultants. When we were coming down on the big pier, contractor decided to do it a little contrary to what the Bureau said. And I've never seen it done. The Bureau sent a letter to the contractor, you're on your own, you're endangering your people. And I was told to take my people off the bridge. And well, I had a guy at Pier 1 watching the plates, and they did this. Luckily, it didn't fail. But they went back, and the consultant was off by 50%. That gives you some idea of the erection stresses that a bridge will take. Lucky we didn't have a failure. Yes? Saw another hand.
You mentioned Charlie Weaver. He used to be a business agent for iron workers.
Yep.
Local 118, was that?
Charlie Weaver, right. That was him sitting there.
On that job?
Yeah, he was sitting there in 2 pictures. He was in his favorite spot, sitting watching them work. Yeah, I got to know those guys pretty darn well. We had a real good relationship with all the iron workers, and even though, you know, we had little conflicts, like he threatened to throw me off the bridge one day, and I mean, I'm still here. Anything else? Well, I really appreciate you coming, because that's my love in the sky, and I carry my 2 cross pens as a construction engineer. Never in my wildest dreams as a farm boy would ever get to the spot that I got to.